President Trump wasn't visiting the Queen today, just using her gardens at Buckingham Palace as a helicopter park and ride. His motorcade then took him off towards Westminster. He later spoke of seeing thousands of well-wishers. The Mall, though, looked empty except for police. Many roads shut down for his convoy. Most protesters kept well away. As he turned into Downing Street, one supporter waved us stars and stripes.
Coming over today, there were thousands of people cheering. And then I heard that there were protests. I said, where are the protests? I don't see any protests. I did see a small protest today when I came, very small. So a lot of it is fake news, I hate to say.
Just round the corner from Downing Street, tens of thousands listened to the Labour leader. Jeremy Corbyn boycotted the state banquet for President Trump last night and said the state visit should never have been allowed.
And by our demonstration here today, we've shown just how determined we, all of us, are to achieve that better place and that better world. Thank you for being here today for peace, for justice and disarmament.
I don't know Jeremy Corbyn, never met him, never spoke to him. He wanted to meet today or tomorrow, and I decided that I would not do that. I think that he is, from where I come from, somewhat of a negative force. I think that people should look to do things correctly as opposed to criticize. I really don't like critics as much as I like and respect people that get things done.
Jeremy Corbyn's office confirmed there had been a request for a working meeting with the President. The President gushed praise at Theresa May and said Brexit would and should happen, even though Theresa May couldn't get her Brexit divorce deal through Parliament.
That deal is teed up. I think that deal is really teed up. I think they have to do something, and perhaps you won't be given the credit that you deserve if they do something, but I think you deserve a lot of credit. I really do. I think you deserve a lot of credit.
Do you agree with your ambassador that the entire economy needs to be on the table in a future trade talk, a trade deal, including the NHS?
I think we're going to have a great trade deal, yes. I think we're going to have a great and very comprehensive trade deal.
With the NHS?
The President didn't quite hear.
Should the NHS be on the table, sir?
I can't hear him. What?
It's the National Health Service. He says, should the National Health Service be on the table?
She probably wished she hadn't helped.
Look, I think everything with a trade deal is on the table. When you're dealing in trade, everything's on the table. So NHS or anything else, or a lot more than that. But everything will be on the table, absolutely. Okay.
But the point about making trade deals is, of course, that both sides negotiate and come to an agreement about what should or should not be in that trade deal.
Not how he sees it, and it prompted an instant tweet from one of those trying to succeed Theresa May. The Health Secretary, Matt Hancock, said, "The NHS isn't on the table in trade talks and never will be, not on my watch." The President went straight from gushing praise at Theresa May to inviting her sworn political enemy, Nigel Farage, in for tea at the US Ambassador's residence. And he was asked about contact with some of the candidates to succeed Theresa May, as one of them, the Foreign Secretary, Jeremy Hunt, looked on.
You had a conversation with Boris Johnson. Could we ask what you spoke about, and will you meet with Michael Gove today?
So I know Boris. I like him. I've liked him for a long time. I think he'd do a very good job. I know Jeremy. I think he'd do a very good job. I don't know Michael, but would he do a good job, Jeremy? Tell me.
The cheek of it amused Philip May. The state visit of President Trump had all been Theresa May's idea. Flattery to the new president she was first to see at the White House when he took over. A president she, like others, hoped to tame. Next month, she will hand over responsibility for US-UK relations to a successor, at a time when policy divides are deep, and as Britain potentially moves away from EU institutions and seeks closer transatlantic economic ties.
Well, our political editor Gary Gibbon and our international editor Lindsay Hilsum are with me now. What a bizarre day of pomp and politics.
Yes, a bizarre day. And some of the ceremonial, which we expect to be yesterday with the Queen, was kind of there with Theresa May, because she's a lame duck Prime Minister. There isn't much that Donald Trump can get out of talks with her. That was really kind of another bit of the ceremony. The interesting politics here, which I don't think is going to leave the scene very quickly, is when Donald Trump started talking about the free trade agreement with the United States
and what it could mean, what he expects of it, and that involvement of the NHS which he wants on the table. And that is a kind of third rail in British politics. And it's been interesting since the Matthew Hancock tweet. Other candidates have been piling in saying, not on my watch as well. They're not going to allow it to come into those talks. This was a mantra, holy of holies, the US-UK trade agreement that would follow Brexit. And now some of these candidates, even pro-Brexit ones, are beginning to sound a bit like EU leaders were sounding about TTIP not so long ago. But one of these people is going to have to deal with Donald Trump, a successor to Theresa May, and they're going to find him massively unpredictable. There he was, gushing at Theresa May, and then going down the road to the US ambassador's residence. You can see a picture of a couple of other people who've just popped in to see him, Ian Duncan Smith and Owen Patterson. So he's already seen them. He's seen Nigel Farage. He's spoken to Boris Johnson. These are all people with the claim to be Theresa May's nemesis. I mean, it's an extraordinary roll call, and we haven't even got to the banquet guest list.
So, Lindsay, special relationship becomes sort of potentially abusive relationship.
Well, look, I don't think Donald Trump has a huge grasp of the NHS. He didn't know what NHS stood for. And when it came to Huawei, you know, we've had all this stuff about, you know, the intelligence relationship between Britain and America could be damaged if Britain signs up for Huawei, the Chinese company, to do its 5G. And he was like, no, it's no problem. The intelligence relationship is all going to be good. He wanted everything to be positive today. But, you know, he said, you know, that out there were no protesters, just cheering crowds for him. You know, it made me think of an old Simon and Garfunkel lyric, all lies and jests, still a man hears what he wants to hear and disregards the rest. And then he was on to his own popularity in the Republican Party. Well, I don't know where he got the figures from, but it was kind of poignant because it's certainly his popularity in his party is much greater than hers, in hers.
I have a 94% approval rating as of this morning in the Republican Party. That's an all-time record. Can you believe that? Isn't that something? I love records. But we have a 94% approval rating in the Republican Party.
So does the relationship between Britain and America actually change?
I don't think you know whether it changes. Of course, it endures whoever is in the White House and whoever is in Downing Street. But certainly this idea that a trade deal would be easy and it would be simple. Look, make America great again. It's as simple as that. He's having a trade war with China. He's working on India. Britain is not that important. It is not at the top of the list. And any kind of trade deal will be on American terms. And of course, Britain, no longer part of the European Union, has far less power. It's quite small, very small compared to the United States. Donald Trump knows that.
Now, Gary, while all this has been going on, the Conservatives have been trying to work out the new rules of their Conservative leadership.
Never one plot line these days, and what they've done is tighten up the rules to try and make a very crowded field a little bit narrower. They're saying that you can only carry on in this contest if you get a certain number of MPs. First round, the threshold's 16, second round, 32 MPs. They're piling pressure on individuals who they don't think have got enough support to stop this looking quite so chaotic. And today they got two of them to back out of the contest, James Cleverly and Kit Malthouse.
Well, we'll speak to one of those candidates in a moment, Sam Gyimah. But before we get to that, of course, there's been something of a tiff been going on between the Mayor of London and President Trump. And Jeremy Corbyn was joining protests in London today, of course. Mr. Trump, not one to shy away from confrontation, used his preferred mode of communication, Twitter, to lash out at the mayor. That was before he'd even landed yesterday. Sadiq Khan, he said, who by all accounts has done a terrible job as Mayor of London, has been foolishly nasty to the visiting President of the United States, by far the most important ally of the United Kingdom. He is a stone-cold loser who should focus on crime in London, not me. Well, that war of words between Sadiq Khan and President Trump has been pretty long-running. Mr. Trump described Mr. Khan's response to the London Bridge terror attack as pathetic. And today, the mayor called the president the poster boy for the far right around the world. I went to speak to Sadiq Khan earlier today, and I asked him why he's been picking a fight with Donald Trump.
Well, I'm not picking a fight. This all began, if you remember, when Donald Trump was running to be the president of the USA, and he had a policy to ban all Muslims from entering the USA, but he said he'd make an exception for me as the Mayor of London. And the point I made in a courteous, polite manner back then was, there's nothing exceptional about me. I think your policies are a wrong one, and I think you're playing into the hands of those extremists who say it's irreconcilable to be a Westerner and a Muslim. And that led to this sort of, Twitter spat from him, by the way. There's been no response from me, but I've got to stand up for our values. And that means when I think that somebody who's the leader of America is used as a poster boy for the far right around the globe, for me to articulate that and say that.
But you have also compared him to 1930s fascists. That means Hitler. Is that a sensible comparison?
If you look at the far right playbook, what it is picking on marginalised communities, picking on minority communities, stoking up fear, playing on people's fears to whip up a frenzy. What you're seeing across Europe and across the world is the rise of nativist populist movements. And I think we can't just allow ourselves to sleepwalk into a situation where you've got many, many leaders across the globe who have these nativist views. And we've got to listen, this is a week where we commemorate the D-Day landings. And by the way, I've never objected to Donald Trump coming here on a working relation visit, coming here to commemorate D-Day. My concerns have been the state visit. My concerns have been the state banquet, all it entails, and the rolling out of the red carpet. Why? Because it condones some of the things he's said and done. And it gives succor, by the way, to the global far-right movement.
The trouble is, as soon as you say fascist 1930s, people think Holocaust, mass murder, complete monsters. That is not what Trump is.
The idea you stoke up fears against immigrants, the idea that you pick on marginalised communities, the idea that somehow the LGBT community having equal rights is wrong, rolling back the progress made on gender equality, all these things should concern us.
Do we then need to rethink what the special relationship is?
I'm not asking for Theresa May, heaven forbid, to be Hugh Grant in Love Actually. What I'm saying is, listen, there are some things we disagree with you about. We think you were wrong to walk away from the climate change agreement. We've got a climate emergency. Please think about coming back. It's really important. You can't build a wall around the consequences of climate change. We think, by the way, having equal rights for women is really important. Please understand that if in some states it's almost impossible to have an abortion, these are the consequences. And this, by the way, the conversations we have with our best friend are different from the conversation we'd have with an acquaintance.
Would you have gone to the Chinese state banquet?
Well, I wasn't invited.
No, it was before you were mayor, but would you have gone?
The point I'm making is this: my expectations on China are different to my expectations on the USA. The expectations we have on our closest ally are different. I wouldn't have invited this president.
So they can abuse human rights and have camps.
No, we've got to call them out. I mean, I'm quite clear in relation to not just.
So would you have gone? Is the question. Would you go to a Chinese state banquet now if there was a state visit?
I would make sure I wouldn't go there and give the impression that I support some of the things they stand for. I think it's important when you meet any world leader, you express the concerns you have in a fraternal, collegiate manner. Diplomacy is very important.
Isn't the bit that he got right though? His criticism of you that you should be concentrating on violent crime in London, not the President of the United States. Your record is bad. People are scared in this city, and instead we're talking to you about geopolitics.
But one of the things that good leaders do is do more than one thing at a time. So yes.
But you're not doing that. That's the point.
But yes, crime is important. So for example, unlike the government, I'm invested in policing in London. Unlike the previous mayor, I've raised council tax and business rates to invest in our policing. So we have in London now a violent crime task force making arrests, bringing charges, but also...
And crime's going up?
No, homicides have gone down in the last year. Under 25 injuries and violent crime have gone down. But the context is we've lost £1 billion from...
They're still much higher than they were, as you know.
Well, violent crime across the country started going up more than 5 years ago. But in London, we're seeing progress in relation to violent crime.
The other person who wasn't at the banquet last night was Sajid Javid, the Home Secretary. Can you think of anything you have in common with Sajid Javid that might mean that he wasn't invited?
Of course, listen, we're both the son of bus drivers. I think this president's got a problem with people whose dads drove buses.
Thank you very much. Well, joining me now is Sam Gyimah, the Conservative MP for East Surrey and a party leadership candidate. What does today tell you about what Britain's post-Brexit relationship with America would really be about?
Well, it's a foretaste of what is to come under a no-deal Brexit scenario where a trade deal with the United States is our best option in terms of international trade we are looking for. The United States will play hardball, they always do, and as Donald Trump said, he would want everything on the table. As far as I'm concerned, the NHS should not be used as a bargaining chip, and I think there are a number of colleagues as well who feel strongly about that, and that means we should be incredibly careful about this idea of a no-deal Brexit.
But realistically, I mean, when the Americans are saying everything's on the table, can Britain protect the NHS when it's in a no-deal Brexit scenario? I mean, we're beggars, not choosers, aren't we?
Well, that is why I have been against the no-deal Brexit, because within that scenario, we are out of control, not in control, and we will be at the mercy of Donald Trump giving us the deal that he wants to do.
So could you realistically make the NHS a red line, or would you just have to relinquish it?
I think that is why I'm fighting against a no-deal Brexit, and the whole basis of my candidacy and the reason why I entered the race and stood on a second referendum platform is that the choice that could face us when the new Prime Minister gets in is a no-deal Brexit or a second referendum, and I think that is the path that we should go down.
But you're not going to survive, are you, the first round of voting?
Look, my campaign is only 48 hours old. Nominations close next Monday in 6 days' time. I've had fantastic support.
How many?
I will be declaring my numbers very soon, but it's only 48 hours old. Some people have been campaigning for weeks and months, so give me time, but I've had some very good support.
Do you have more supporters than I could count on one hand?
I do.
Is my clue. You do?
Yeah.
Right, so you're over 5. But
No, look, the key thing is, I mean, I've said I will declare the numbers at the close nominations. This is a competitive process. As other candidates drop out, there are also more people available to approach. And you'd understand why in a competitive process, for good reasons, you don't want to declare your hand too early. So that's why.
How would you get on with Donald Trump? I mean, he can't even remember Michael Gove, and he met him and talked to him for a long time.
Anyone who's Prime Minister of the United Kingdom would have to work with the Prime Minister of the United States. You have to find a way to work together.
And so you'd have gone ahead with a state visit. You'd have been there at the banquet.
You've got to work with him, but he puts America first. I'll put Britain first.
Sam Gyimah, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Now let's go over to that banquet at the US Ambassador's residence, Wingfield House. Kathy is just outside.
Yes, thank you, Christian. I am just outside. This is as close as you can get because if you can see behind me, there's very tight security. The road's been closed off, lots of police. But this is where tonight's banquet is taking place, hosted by President Trump himself. The guest list is something of a closely guarded secret, but I'm hoping to spot a few people coming in and out. Perhaps I should, though, keep an eye on President Trump's Twitter feed, which is now full of videos of the lavish hospitality laid on for the Trump family, and he is clearly reveling in the pomp. But beyond the walls of Buckingham Palace and Downing Street, the atmosphere has been very different, with thousands of anti-Trump protesters taking to the streets of London and other cities. The President himself has been largely shielded from the demonstration, which he's dismissed as very small and fake news. Darshana Soni joined the march from Trafalgar Square to Parliament Square.
They described it as a carnival of resistance. President Trump described it as fake news and very small. Organisers claim that 75,000 took to the streets. Hard to verify, but turnout wasn't as big as the last time he visited. The polarising president managed to unite the full spectrum of left-wing causes.
It's not just about chlorinated chicken, even though that is what I'm dressed as today.
He's a climate change denier, and then there's his racism, his homophobia.
Have you come out on Eid?
Yeah, we have come out on Eid today. It's important to come out on Eid, actually, to say that Trump's politics isn't welcome here in the UK.
But do you feel a bit disheartened knowing that all of his minders and the people with him will keep him so far away from this, he might not even know what's going on?
He'll hear the message, we're confident of that.
Mr. Trump certainly did hear a message, even if it was his own version. As he was tucked away in Downing Street, demonstrators were prevented from marching directly past. Perhaps at that distance it was easy to mistake their jeers for cheers.
It was tremendous spirit and love. There was great love. It was an alliance. And I didn't see the protesters until just a little while ago, and it was a very, very small group of people put in for political reasons. So it was fake news.
The Metropolitan Police said their officers, 3,500 of them had been deployed, made just one arrest. Although there were some minor skirmishes.
You have to open your mind and think, well, hang on, maybe these people don't think he's a racist.
When a handful of Donald Trump supporters braved the crowds.
No, he's not. Oh, my God, bro.
You seem to have wandered into the wrong protest.
No, I don't think so. I was just expressing my support for the United States.
George Clinton is from Richmond in Virginia.
Queen Elizabeth should declare a snowflake emergency. There's a lot of people who are very down on the United States, and that's very sad.
We will not stand for that. We will fight with every last breath of our body.
The Labour leader was in his element here, criticising Mr Trump's policies on immigration, human rights and climate change. His supporters didn't seem too worried at the president's description of him as a negative force.
I'm not saying Trump's a fascist, but he's given strength to fascists and the far right.
He doesn't like being snubbed, does he, Donald Trump? How do you think he'll treat Corbyn if he is elected?
Oh, I think in a similar way to the way he's treated Sadiq Khan. He'll use some of his childish language in the same way. You know, say that he's a loser or comment on his physical appearance or other sort of childish bullying insults and things like that.
Organisers had hoped that this would be the biggest demonstration in British history. They didn't quite achieve that, but declared it a success. The President declared, meanwhile, that there was a lot of love for him in London today.